Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our final webinar session for Red Squirrel Awareness Week 2022. I just want to reiterate my apologies for technical difficulties yesterday and for having to reschedule. And thanks to all those that are still able to join us today. Recordings of all the sessions, though, the Red Squirrel Conservation Update Wednesday, and this morning's session on the UK Squirrel Accord will be made available on our YouTube channel over the next couple of days. But this afternoon, we welcome Judi Dunn of the Wildwood Trust, who is going to look at red squirrel breeding, for which she has a wealth of experience, and I thank her for joining us. There will be a Q&A session afterwards, so please do use Zoom's Q&A function to ask any questions, and I'll try and keep an eye on that and collate them and put them to Judi after her presentation. Do feel free to use the chat function, which should all be working, for any discussions, and that would be great. Okay, so I'll now hand over to Judi, and if you want to share your screen, Judi, on your presentation, that'd be great. Yeah, that's great. That's all working. Thanks.
Okay. Everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. As I said, I'm Judi Dunn. I work for the Wildwood Trust here in Kent, and we're a zoological collection that specialises in native species and involved in the education of public and schools, conservation and research into the restoration of native species habitats. I'm also a member of the Native Species Working Group and chair of the Red Squirrel Focus Group, two organisations that actually come underneath the umbrella of what is known as the British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquaria, commonly known as BIAZA. That's just one of the many acronyms. No, one of the few acronyms I'll be using this afternoon, not too many of them. So captive management of red squirrels comes under two types of institution, really. Firstly, being zoological collections, the majority of which are members of BIAZA and get a lot of support and advice through that organisation. And also a number of private breeders who are linked in with the zoological collections and are assisted in a number of ways. And historically, this little band of collections of red squirrels has always been a relatively small number. And so this has led to some challenges along the way. But today, I'd like to just give an overview of how Wildwood Trust manages their captive breeding group, just as a way of an example, as the many breeders around the country, we all operate differently, but just to give you a flavour of some of the issues that we come across. And then I'd like to report on changes and developments within the zoo and breeders community and how we are collectively managing the UK captive population, and maybe along the way illustrate a couple of issues that are presenting themselves as challenging at this particular time. So to start with, in 2019, just before COVID struck, we decided to review our breeding facilities. They were very old and dilapidated, and we came up with the idea of actually rebuilding our enclosures. And the first unit was built in 2021, which you can see here. And we've incorporated new features to take into account health screening requirements that can be needed for reintroduction projects, and also to improve and build on recommendations that have been provided by our working document known as the Captive Red Squirrel Management National Recommendations and Guidance. So if you look here, we actually have two units joined together by a meshed tunnel, which can be closed down with slides. The first unit on the left is at a height of 5 meters with a width and a length of around about 3.6 meters. Now this height of 5 meters is a significant increase to what we used to use, and we took this on board because we felt it would give our squirrels a greater security because they can access a higher level, and that actually reduces stress in squirrels, and lower stress levels means lower risk of falling ill. You'll also notice around the bottom of the enclosures a tinned border of about 45 centimetres in height. All enclosures are completely underwired. and the tinned border ensures that no rodents can get into these enclosures and cause problems. Another feature you may be able to see is at the back, it seems to be a white sheeting, and it is a white sheeting that's completely enveloping the back wall and also the side wall. This is an important thing that we've had to produce this year due to the extreme weather conditions that we've had, not only for red squirrels, but all animals around zoos in the country. These extremely high temperatures that we experienced. We put up the sheeting that gave extra shade, but also when temperatures were above 25 degrees centigrade, we actually hosed down the sheeting, soaked it once, twice, maybe 3 times a day in order to ensure when the water was evaporating from the sheeting, it caused a drop in temperature within the actual enclosure and thus gave a nice cooling atmosphere for the squirrels inside. I'll just in a little more close up show this mesh tunnel that connects the large tall enclosure to the smaller area. The smaller area has a height of about 3 meters by 4 meters in width and length, a more traditional height that we normally encourage. But the reason for this is that we have a number of options to be flexible with our breeding and holding of our squirrels. So firstly, we'll have a pair that will produce a litter, and once the litter becomes weaned and independent and more adventurous, we can open up the slides between the 2 areas and they can migrate into the other side, and it just gives them a better area to work in. But it also means that at any point we can close down one unit against the other, so we could separate these youngsters if need be, or we could separate a male and keep the young with the female. It gives us more options. We can also close off between the 2 enclosures completely, as this 2 meter gap is required for a minimum gap for quarantine purposes. You can have a 2 meter separation of enclosures. And finally, also, it's just for working practice when we are trying to keep everything clean and improve biosecurity, we're able to close down one area and have squirrels in one side and then do a deep clean and disinfecting of the enclosure on the other side, and vice versa, swap them over. So it's all great improvements in the management of our captive group. And then also, just on the other side of the smaller unit, we have an indoor facility. And this has been taken on for the ability to isolate individual squirrels and screen them for pathogens. So you would pop them in here for 24 hours maximum and collect fecal samples to screen for any disease. And individual screening in this manner can be a requirement prior to any squirrels going out to a pre-release site for reintroduction projects. But also it serves, again, for flexibility. It serves as a holding area and a convalescing area for any sick animals, because we're able to supply heat. Now, another feature that is important in captive breeding is nest boxes for breeding in and nest box design. And we do have a lot of variety between breeders. This is what we come up with, but there are certain essential features that you must take into consideration. That the box should be waterproof, obviously. A nest hole entrance site that we can see here, ours is around 7 to 8 centimeters in diameter. And the positioning of this nest hole is important. It's about 2/3 up from the bottom of the box. And that's to ensure that young squirrels, before they're at the actual weaning age and come out into the world and have an explore, that they're not coming out too early, accidentally slipping out of the box before weaning processes, or that they're suitable for being able to get about. So that ensures they stay snug inside. And we also have, as you can see there, a sliding door which would which we could pop across. It's another feature that we could close the box and take the box down from the side of the wall that is attached to in the enclosure, a way of catching them up quite easily and safely. And in the right-hand picture, you can see a wooden arm attached to the back of our nest box, and that's so that we're able to move them about easily within the enclosure without having to unscrew hinges and all sorts. So that works very well for us in our enclosures. And you can see here a picture of those the box up in the enclosure, and the arm that's on the back actually slots down onto that bracket, and we can put many brackets up in the enclosure and put several boxes around and move the heights of them should we need to do that. Again, just greater flexibility in the day-to-day management of them. And another very important factor in captive breeding is, of course, a good diet. And again, in our current guidelines that we've had updated, we do again describe a wide variety of diets utilised by all our breeders. And I guess I feel that's probably one area that we could adapt and improve on to get a best practice approach. So if you're considering a diet analysis of a squirrel, you would be looking at the diet of a wild squirrel compared to the diet of a captive squirrel. And here's quite a conundrum in that the red squirrels, in an ideal habitat in the wild, would be following the seasonality of a deciduous woodland with the spring buds and the spring catkins, moving through to early summer, where they may have to rely on insects, and then sap from the barks, and then into the fruitful autumn fruits of the trees, and caching these fruits for the winter. But of course, in many parts of the country, squirrels in the wild have had to retract into coniferous forests as their stronghold, as they fare better in coniferous forests compared to grey squirrels. And therefore, the seasonality, the variety that they would normally have is replaced by the conifer cones. So there's a reduction in variety, but there is a consistency in the food supply that will be had all year round, which is a major payoff for moving into those woodlands. But at Wildwood, we have a dry seed mix that is present with the animals 24 hours, comprising of sunflower seeds, maize, barley, whole wheat, and grass nuts. And then again, this is supplemented with nuts in shells. Mainly we use hazelnuts and something known as Chinese pine nuts, given in rotation, but we'll also add in some walnuts and almonds when available. And they'll get a daily portion of vegetables and one fruit choice to keep the sugar content down. And again, seasonality will offer them mushrooms in the autumn. You could offer them mushrooms all year round, but they won't take them all year round. They'll only eat them in the autumn. And well, we're fortunate being in a woodland environment that we can offer natural browse when in season. So beech masts, hornbeam seed, maple keys they can take. And another feature with the captive red squirrels is that we do have to give them a good supply of calcium. The female breeding squirrel has a huge intake of calcium in the breeding season to ensure good bone development of the young. So all year round they have access to natural deer antler, and also we give them cuttlefish shells. And then actually at the height of breeding season, we'll add in a powdered supplement of calcium on food twice a week. So in the breeding year, the actual way we manage these red squirrels, you can follow the timeline of how they breed and the various key factors that we need to look at. So breeding can start as early as December in the way that they are courtship or chasing and mating through the months of December and February. And then you'd get your first flush of spring births through February and April. Now, all these births take place hidden from the view of red squirrel keepers here at the park. They're tucked away in the nest boxes that I showed you earlier. And we operate a complete hands-off policy. We don't do any checks of the nest boxes to see how things are going on, unless we really do feel that something has gone seriously awry. So the first, apart from actually seeing the physical changes in our breeding females, you probably see maybe a swollen belly or distended teats, but the first real showing of the youngsters is actually them emerging at around 5, 6 to 8 weeks of age as they come out of the nest box to start their weaning process and going on to whole foods. And that's a really important date that we mark down in our breeding calendar, because that's the date that we can then add on 6 or 7 weeks to give a good estimate of the date that they're going to be fully weaned and independent from mum, a date which is quite important if we're going to suspect that a female squirrel is going to go on and produce a second litter, which they can do if they're a good weight and very healthy and they've given a spring birth. They will go on to produce a second litter in early summer. Now, in order to make sure that our female squirrel is kept as healthy as possible, we will take away the first litter so that she doesn't lose condition and that the actual numbers and density in the breeding enclosure are kept low, and so that keeps the stress levels down at the same time. So moving out at 12, 13, 14 weeks of age, the first litter is accomplished. And again, post-weaning management, the movement of squirrels, again, we try and keep it as low and stress-free as possible. So we do have a number of options. We can actually, if we know that we've got them in their nest boxes, pull across that sliding door I showed you earlier on a nest box and move that way, or we can actually encourage them through from our large breeding enclosure into the smaller unit with the slide systems and the tunnel, which is a nice hands-off way of accomplishing things. Or we can actually use a live trap. And I always recommend this particular type of trap. I find it's a very gentle and easy system that the squirrels really get used to and are quite calm inside. It's actually a water vole trap, but the feature is that you can see on the right-hand side, this door is set up and to trap the animal, and it's although it's a guillotine door, it's not spring-loaded. The door will close when the squirrel hits it with the treadle that you can see 2/3 of the way along there on the bottom. When the paw is placed on that treadle, then it activates the door and it just slides down gently. And once inside, again, the squirrel is able to sit in the back box there very calmly in the dark, eating whatever we've supplied in the trap. So it's a very gentle way of doing things. And normally you would let the squirrels get used to these, place them in the enclosure for 3 or 4 days, and then when needing to move them out, you set the door and away you go. So that's an overview of some of the key features and events within the annual captive management of red squirrels. And again, of course, once they're separated from their parents, they're kept as a sibling group, and they'll go on to be sexed and weighed and microchipped, probably at around 5 to 6 months, really. And then we make sure that they are made available to either other breeders or a release program through our Studbook keeper, who I'll go on to explain a little bit more about later on. So I just want to give a summary of really over the years where the majority of our squirrels have gone to, and of course ourselves, as many other of the breeders around the country, we have contributed to reintroduction programs, and these have centred around Wales, and the most notable being the Island of Anglesey project led by Dr. Craig Shuttleworth and what is now known as the Red Squirrel Trust. So ourselves and many other breeders took part in this project. Our association started in 2004 and over 12 years, we were delighted to be able to donate 25 animals to the project. And then a little more recently, relatively recently, we have been associated with the Clochainog project in northeast Wales, which that's a very beautiful large forest that was a stronghold for red squirrels, but in recent times it was realised that the population there was dwindling quite alarmingly, and this led to Natural Resources Wales spearheading a reintroduction programme into this area. And we have donated several squirrels to reinforce and bolster the population that is present there in the forest. And collectively, our national captive breeding group hopes to lend its continuing support for this reintroduction. So what's been going on in the world of zoos and private breeders? With several events, quite strangely took place in the same year, 2019, which led to some coming together and collaboration, which is proving very successful. So firstly, the Bible of breeding, our captive red squirrel management guidelines, was updated by the Welsh Mountain Zoo. They originally published it in 1995. They updated it, and we had contributions from over 18 breeders and veterinary specialists, and it covers all aspects of animal husbandry of squirrels, enclosure design, the diets, general health and diseases of squirrels. And this document now is handed out to every new holder and breeder who requests to join the group, to ask for the loan of squirrels to come onto their site and potentially to breed. And I believe in that same year, the Welsh Mountain Zoo initiated placing a particular individual to actually be a species monitor or studbook keeper for the red squirrel. And this again was appointed by Welsh Mountain Zoo. They're very well placed to handle all these requests. And this is currently managed by Amy Ridgway, and I'll explain a little more about Studbooks in a minute. And then finally, the other initiative that was launched, again, this was through BIAZA, the British Association for Zoos, and held under the working group of the native species. We formed a co-committee, if you like, a subcommittee known as the Red Squirrel Focus Group. But firstly, let me try and give a look at animal stud books. I'm sure that you're aware that in the world of horse racing you have stud books. Well, in the world of captive breeding and zoological collections, we also use stud books. In zoological terms, I think the simple definition is it's a record of the lineage of a wild animal bred in captivity. But that's is very simple. It goes way beyond that. The importance of records in managing any animals cannot be overstated. They're vital for allowing evidence-based decisions to be made, and the advancement of data and information to be shared throughout zoos and breeders around the country. So what we have with our BIAZA members, again, our Association of Zoos and Aquarium, we have a system that many of them utilize. It's another acronym. It's a web-based online database system known as ZIMS, which stands for Zoological Information Management Systems. And then within the ZIMS system, there is a module that handles all the studbook information, which our Welsh Mountain partner, Amy, is currently working very hard on. But you can see from this snapshot that overall in zoological collections, we have over 1,500 studbooks. The majority of them mammals, and the majority of them will be exotic species. But if you can see to one side there, listed alphabetical order, we've got Squirrus vulgaris, our red squirrel, the Institute holding that's Colwyn Bay. And then you can see just a snapshot there of the number of living animals currently held on the stud book and the number of holders. So we have 48 animals and 9 holders. Now that's that number is a working document, and the numbers will change and increase hopefully over time. So it's constantly being revised, but just taken as a snapshot at that time. So what kind of information is held there? Well, information is basically the unique identification of all individual animals, usually by means of a microchip, a little chip inserted into the back of the neck, and then we'll need date of birth, the location of that birth, very importantly, parent ID, a record of all the transfers of each animal, where they've gone around the country, if they have, and also medical notes, extremely important, and then any births associated with the squirrel, and then finally, later on, much later on, we hope, date of death and the cause of that death, possibly, hopefully with a post-mortem to further our knowledge of incidences of that kind. So that's what we're currently working on, or Amy's Welsh Mountain Zoo are working on. So to ensure that we work closely with the stud book and to keep the success of the stud book going, and also to make sure that the guidelines are being looked at and adhered to, BIASA, the Native Species Working Group, decided to form this coalition of captive breeders known as the Red Squirrel Focus Group. And we felt that we could lead a coordinated and supportive breeding collaboration, offering best practice for captive husbandry and advise private breeders on reintroduction projects, because in the past there has been incidences of captive red squirrels being donated to poorly regulated and ill-managed reintroduction schemes. So what we have here is a group of 5 highly experienced zoological breeding establishments, and historically they've been chosen. Of course, we work very closely with Welsh Mountain Zoo and Amy. The Welsh Mountain Zoo is a focal point for the Welsh reintroduction projects, and historically it is one of the first zoo collections to house red squirrels, so a wealth of knowledge there. Over in the east of the country, in East Anglia and Norfolk, Chrissy Kelly oversees a small group of private breeders, which for many years have historically been attached to Thetford Forest. Thetford Forest, of course, had conservation efforts taking place in the late 1990s to try and shore up the demise of the red squirrel in that forest, which unfortunately was overrun in the end by the grey squirrels, and they lost their place in that forest. And also in recent times, a number of those private breeders have decided to stand down and donate their collection to other breeders around the country, and their loss we're hoping to take up with new people in the group. And then we move from the east of the country down to the southwest, where we have Paradise Park in Cornwall, a zoo there that breeds and also mentors and monitors another small private group of breeders in the area, and David Wilcock's management. And this group are also very focused on the Cornwall Red Squirrel project. And whilst Knowsley Safari Park isn't known to hold squirrels or breed squirrels, they are involved in a major wild squirrel conservation initiative known as Reclaiming Reds. So we welcome them on our team for further advice. And then Peak Wildlife Park in Staffordshire is a relatively new zoological collection historically in our group, but they're committed to establishing a breeding collection and have the facilities to also expand that collection. And we're really looking forward with James Butler in charge to bring their zoo on. And again, we also have some more advisory people, a little more on the acronyms there. BIASA has a what's known as WAG, which is known as Reintroduction Advisory Group, and we go to them when we need to discuss and have advice on those particular topics. And then externally, we do love to have advice from Dr. Craig Shuttleworth and David Everest, APHA vet who has a wealth of experience in disease control of wild red squirrels. So that's our group working very hard, bringing everything together. And one of the first things we thought we would look at and to make sure that we bring breeders together, focus their attention on the important aspects of being part of a captive breeding group, is set out 10 points that we hope that all new breeders and current breeders could abide by. It's agreement which we hope will focus their efforts on the role and responsibilities required when successfully breeding squirrels. So it's based, as I said, based on 10 points, and the breeder hopefully will agree and sign this memorandum of understanding prior to receipt of any squirrels on loan. The loaning of squirrels is really organised by the Studbook keeper, because she has all the relevant information there to bring in recommendations and suggestions, and she will say to a certain collection, could you, if you've got a surplus of that particular animal, could it go to another collection? That's really the role of a Studbook keeper in that manner. Now, it's not a legally binding document, but it is hoped to ensure that the Studbook keeper is consulted and contacted on all important information, and it hopefully protects squirrels from being released into poorly regulated reintroduction programs. So whilst all this is going on and our Studbook information and data is being set up and adding to and increasing, I have got some information, historical information, to show you in this particular graph. It isn't taken from our Studbook, it's actually generated by ZIMS. So this will exclude any information from private breeders, but I do think it gives a snapshot and a flavour of what has been occurring over the last 20 years. So we have the number of holders along the bottom there, from 2002 to 2022, and then the population of red squirrels and over the same period. And you can see there can be quite, there is a wide fluctuation going on there, even though strangely there isn't a huge fluctuation in the number of breeders. And I think a few general remarks can be given that I think you can see the trend there, that was the request for squirrels for Anglesey's reintroduction project, as the between 2004 and 2016 there was such an increase going on there. But obviously Anglesey got to carrying capacity successfully, has their population, and so there was a fall showing there. And then we now have this slightly concerning drop from 2016 onwards. Quite clearly we are having a drop in numbers. We have had a few losses of breeders. So what we can surmise from that, it could either be that the breeders aren't putting together so many pairs in a breeding year, because the numbers required are not, the supply is not there anymore. Maybe the loss of breeders, or it may be maybe something more sinister, in that our actual fecundity of our breeding group might be being affected by a loss of genetic diversity within the group, and that's something we really do need to look at further and track. So that's one of the challenges that the group faces, is how to maintain a healthy, diverse population in sufficient numbers to respond to requests on reintroductions. So for the future aims, as I said, the challenge is to grow the captive population and provide the flexibility to adjust to requirements and responses for reintroduction projects. And we certainly do need to investigate the genetic diversity of the captive population, and if there is impacting on fecundity. And anecdotally, when you're discussing things with other breeders, you may say, oh well, I noticed that maybe the litter sizes aren't as large as they used to be. I've noticed that for the last few years, our females aren't producing a second litter. Again, all this needs investigating and researching. And then thirdly, we always are continuing to improve husbandry management and techniques, and give support to smaller collections and breeders who may not have the facilities that larger establishments have, support them in all the work that they do. We have seen a number of national initiatives occurring recently as the importance of native species restoration grows in this country. We've got the English Code for translocations and reintroductions. We've got Natural England launching a species reintroduction task force, and the government publishing its Nature Recovery Network. And so for us in the Red Squirrel Captive Breeding Group, we're committed to improving the fortunes of holding a healthy, diverse population of red squirrels that can form a base to contribute to appropriate red squirrel restoration within all these wonderful initiatives. So I'll finish there and say thank you very much for listening, and take any questions.
That's fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Judi. Wonderful work you're doing, and it's great to see it's progressing so well. And as you say, lots of more focus being put on recovery of native species, certainly. Just a question for me is, if there is an interest in getting involved in red squirrel breeding and the Red Squirrel Breeding Network, what would you advise as kind of a first step, or the first steps you should take?
Yes, it is to contact Welsh Mountain Zoo and Amy Ridgway. The Studbook keeper is the focal point. She's holding the information, so she's gathering the information. And then what Amy does is come to us in the focus group and say, we've had approaches by these institutes and collections, and we'll discuss it there, and then take it forward from that point. So yes, I would say Welsh Mountain Zoo is the first point of contact.
And that's, I mean, and to do that first before you even think about kind of building an enclosure and, you know, putting any funds into those kind of things.
Yes, definitely, because we can offer a world of advice on how to plan your enclosure and what it would entail and what you need. So of course, when you go forward from there, then you can fix your budget as to how much it's going to cost. Yes, it's best to do that first rather than build your enclosure and then realise afterwards it's not going to be suitable.
Or there aren't any red squirrels.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know of a few places. Is it the Peak Wildlife Trust? Or the Peak
Wildlife Park. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yes, they quite recently opened one, didn't they? And I know Yorkshire Arboretum have built one, and so I think, and there's a lot of interest. I'm getting quite a few queries in from people interested in getting involved.
Yes, certainly. Yorkshire Arboretum is one of the newest ones, and they've put in a lot of work. Yeah, and we're really positive that that's going to work well for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And what kind of messaging would you advise? So, you know, when people come to see the enclosure, the messaging around kind of the importance of red squirrel breeding or red squirrel conservation, etc.
Well, just that it's an iconic species that none of us really want to lose. And there are many ways of displaying a red squirrel in a zoological setting, but as you know, plans and developments move forward, we're looking hopefully to the future that there would be, firstly, a mainland England reintroduction project that could occur, which would pave the way to maybe seeing red squirrels back on mainland England, which would be so exciting.
I know there's a great interest in that, and actually it's something I updated on quickly this morning, but we've secured funding from Natural England, and Natural England has secured funding to work with the IUCN and ourselves to develop a reintroduction strategy for mainland England. There have been a lot of concerns because of the number of grey squirrels that we have in mainland England, but what hopefully that project will do, it should start next year and be over a 2-year project, will take into account all of the evidence evidence, all of the available evidence, all of the views, all of the stakeholder opinion and activities, and hopefully put something together that at the end of that everybody can support, and it would be a collaborative way of working towards red squirrel reintroductions in mainland England.
Very exciting, yes.
Yeah, it is. Great. There are no other questions. Is there anything you just wanted to finish off by saying? Is there anything kind of a key message that you want to just, or something you want to reiterate?
Well, just to say that we're all hoping now that we're really focused and really bringing out and increasing the profile of captive red squirrel husbandry and management, gearing up really for, you know, the years ahead where we would like to contribute to red squirrel restoration.
And is there anything at Wildwood, you know, I know you've got the red squirrels, do you do talks and red squirrel events that people can come along to? Because there's 2 Wildwood Trust, Wildwood locations, isn't there?
Yes, that's right. Yes, sorry, there's Wildwood Trust in Kent, and then we have a sister park down in Devon, and they have been involved for many years with their red squirrels. They have what we know as a walkthrough, which is a delightful way of going in to see the squirrels. You can walk amongst them, and you can get quite up close to them. And yes, they offer talks every day, and even what we know as red squirrel experiences, where you can just go in as a group to see them by yourselves. And we have a vast education program for both sites, for schools and the public. Yes, to learn all about the red squirrel.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Definitely things to do, not just for Red Squirrel Awareness Week, but all year round.
Yes, certainly.
Well, thanks ever so much, Judi, for today, and to all our previous speakers earlier this Red Squirrel Awareness Week, and to all the attendees that joined us for the various sessions. I hope you found them all useful and interesting. There's certainly lots of fascinating red squirrel progress and conservation and knowledge shared. As I said, they will be available via our YouTube channel, along with lots of other videos on red squirrel conservation, tree damage and health, and grey squirrel management. But for now, I'll say goodbye and do enjoy the rest of this important week and get involved wherever you can. Thanks, Judi. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.